Absolute Batman has now been going for over a year, and by the time this video releases it will have 15 issues. Now I'll be the first to admit, I'm not the biggest comic book reader. I've read a lot of the popular Batman comics, mind you, like The Long Halloween, Dark Victory, The Court of Owls, etc. But I'm definitely not someone who's read all the comic runs or anything. However, a few months back I decided to start reading Absolute Batman from the beginning, and it seemed like a good jumping on point, with it being a new continuity, and I've got to say, I really like it. There's been so many iterations of Batman across the many decades of the character's existence, especially iterations that take place in the character's early years, but this still manages to be a fresh take on the mythos. It's not just because all his villains looks like something you'd fight in Elden Ring, but even the changes it makes to the character of Bruce himself and the side characters like Alfred really help make this a fresh take on the character and his world, of how many alterations there are to the traditional story. The first story arc, titled Zoo, served as a good introduction to this rendition of Batman, where the antagonists are a group known as the Party Animals, led by Black Mask. The very first issue primarily takes place from Alfred's perspective, as we see this new version of Gotham through his eyes, as well as this new version of Batman, though we do get to see a bit of Bruce's perspective as well, and a few teases of a new backstory for this universe. I gotta say, I do really like this version of Alfred, and it's very different than the version we're familiar with. Instead of being a butler, he's basically an agent, and doesn't have any prior experience of Bruce. In fact, he doesn't actually meet Bruce until he's already Batman. This version of Alfred is much more brash and headstrong compared to the more calm, reserved one from other iterations, and he himself tends to get more involved in the action, as he's been sent to do research on the Party Animals, and even Batman himself. We also get our introduction to Bruce himself in this issue, and it's here we learn what separates him from the traditional version. He's not rich in this version, as much more part of the middle class, and another big change is that his mother, Martha, is still alive in this version. He's been raising him on her own for most of his life since Thomas still dies in this iteration. He's also even more brutal than Batman's tends to be in his early years, pretty much putting criminals on the verge of death. We also see in the first issue that he's friends with some of his rogues gallery, most notably Wayland, Edward, Oswald and Harvey. He has close friendships with all of them, and even trains with Wayland from time to time. It's quite cool to see a new spin of these characters, as instead of being evil straight away like Edward and Oswald tend to be usually, they actually are good people at the beginning, and it's actually pretty sad when you find out what happens to them later on in the story. We get our first real look at this version of Batman when the Party Animals attack a conference held by Jim Gordon, who's mayor in this universe, and Martha, who actually works for Jim. They storm the building and prepare to shoot everyone, but they're quickly stopped when Batman intervenes, and we get our first look at him. One of the Party Animals tries to attack, but here we get our first look at this Batman's brutality when he cuts the guy's hand off. This Batman's even more vicious than other iterations, and that's saying something when Arkham Origins Batman exists. Anyways, this action sequence is really cool, and I love how we have Alfred and back analysing all of Batman's tactics throughout the fight, as we see just how strategic this version of Batman is, and he's not just some brute. He moves quick, dispatches them all with ease, and is slowly throwing guys through windows. He's essentially sending them all a message by making sure they see firsthand just how terrifying he is, for he's breaking their bones in front of each other to spread the fear. Even when they try running off, he literally blows up the staircase and takes them all down, always staying one step ahead of them. I also love the art in this story. Nick Dragotta did a great job here, and every panel has so much detail in it, from the designs to the background, that really kept me immersed, and always making sure we know exactly what's happening in each moment, and all the moves Batman makes. Even the way he draws characters like Batman, and later on Bane, really make them feel like unstoppable forces, especially in comparison to their other opponents. I also find this moment funny where Alfred thinks he's got the drop on him, only to be immediately outplayed. This first issue is paced very well, as we get to know everything we need to know about this new iteration of the world and its characters, without it ever feeling like too much at once. Even the way we get to learn about Bruce's past is handled well, without making it feel like too much exposition, as we get to see a profile of him through Alfred, who's been watching him from a distance and monitoring him. It's here we see that when he was a kid and went on a trip with his class, Bruce's followers murdered in the zoo instead of Crime Alley, and later we even see Bruce feels a little bit responsible, even though it wasn't his fault, as they were on that trip because he won an award from his school, making him feel even more guilty. And so also here, he had his first experience with Batch, which is how he got the idea for his alter ego in this universe. We get to see just how adaptable this version of Bruce is, despite not having all the money the original version does. He still improved his abilities by taking on a variety of different jobs, working at City Hall, becoming an engineer, etc., until he's learned everything he can about Gotham. We get to see a bit more of Martha here, and their close relationship for her son, and I like how this is why Alfred hesitates to just kill Bruce here, as he is his own daughter, though his relationship with her is strained, and this causes him to hesitate, showing that he does have morals and isn't just merciless, and that he has some humanity. Even though it only lasted for an issue, I also like how we see Bruce's resourcefulness here by setting up his base in a bunch of abandoned towers that he knew about because he helped work on them. This Bruce doesn't have a Batcave, so he has to make do with what he has, and I also like how Alfred's intelligence is shown here as well, as despite Batman constantly staying a step ahead, Alfred was still able to deduce his identity and figure out where his base was, which shows just how valuable his experience will be when he teams up with Bruce later on. It was pretty funny for him to be arrogant about Bruce's no-kill rule and think he wouldn't shoot only to get blasted in the face and find out his gun was made non-lethal, once again showing just how badass this version of Batman is, as he literally drives off the damn building and still comes out unscathed. Throughout the next few issues, we're further shown how unstoppable this Batman seems, as he very much mows through the party animals, and Alfred finds out he has more hideouts throughout the city. The party animals track him down to the towers, and you get one of my favourite panels as Batman sets fire to the building as he knew they would come and sends them running away, and it's revealed this is all just a trick by him to once again inspire fear in them as the building burns, and it kinda resembles an image of Batman. This Batman takes theatricality to the next level to spread his symbol, while to take extreme actions such as this, showing how he's even a bit more crazier than normal. I will also say it's cool to see a bit more of the Rogues as Bruce's friends, and we see how close they are, how they meet up regularly to play poker, and we see just how much Bruce trusts them, and he confides in them about the party animals' masks and how they work, and Edward takes one of them to analyse. It's also here we learn Selene is one of their friends, though we haven't seen her yet in the story. After speaking to Harvey, Bruce gets a lead and heads back to Hill's office, where we first hear mention of Arkham, and we also get to see more of this version of Black Mask. I actually really like this version of Black Mask, and I like how he gets a bit of time to shine here, because I never feel like he's gotten his fair due. I liked him in Birds of Prey, but that's really the only memorable appearance he's gotten. In Arkham Origins, he got completely overshadowed by Joker and Bane, so it's nice to see him actually be a threat here, of how he sets up the party animals, and just how sinister he is, how he literally blows up the building Batman's in with an RPG, but not before letting them know about a deal they could make if Batman survives. His ruthlessness was shown earlier when he literally cut off the heads of Falcone and Maroni and keeps the heads of his rivals on display, all whilst maintaining the persona of a normal businessman, like in his conversation with Harry Bullock, where he tries to manipulate him into turning on Jim, effectively playing the long game. Anyways, it looks like Bruce is cornered, but he quickly flees the building and runs into Alfred, who proposes they work together for a bit. It's here we get our first look at Batman having a massive bat-themed dump truck. We get a really cool chase scene where Batman's being chased by both the party animals and the cops, but he always manages to outwit them. It's here Alfred explains more about Black Mask's deal and how Bruce should take it, as he could use the money to really expand Batman's symbol. I will say one criticism I do have of this story is that despite this being advertised as being a middle-class Batman, sometimes it does feel like he's supposed to be rich, for he's able to get a vehicle like this. Not to mention, having all these hideouts does kind of feel like it goes against the premises of the series, as if he has all these resources at his disposal, instead of having nothing but his wit and his skill. This scene is still great though, and it's funny to see Alfred wonder how the hell he got in this situation, as he tries to explain the plan to Batman. He really tries into the water to escape, and since he's Batman, he already has an escape route figured out. The other part of this issue explores a bit more of the other side characters, as you get flashbacks to Bruce and Selena from their childhood, who tries to help him forget about that day in the zoo by taking them to a meetup with their other friends so they can watch a movie together, and it's definitely a heartwarming moment, as Bruce still has people he can fall back on. Even later on when he meets up with Edward, it's nice to see a little bit more of their dynamic, as even he basically tells him to drop the whole matter, as he actually doesn't want Bruce to get himself killed. I do like this version of Edward, as instead of being the egomaniac we all know, he's still a bit zany, but he does genuinely value his friends, and it's cool to see a new take on him, while still keeping the original's traits, and we even get to see a little bit more of his ambition, as he really creates a robot that he discusses issues with Bruce, instead of just speaking to him directly. We also get to see a bit of the inner conflict within Bruce, as he contemplates taking Sionis' deal. It's pretty obvious he's not going to do it, but this is his first real test of morality he's had in the story, and he has the chance to make the symbol of Batman bigger than he could imagine. Even Alfred tries to persuade him to take the deal, and says he and his team will catch Black Mask later, but of course, Bruce isn't willing to stand by and let the party animals continue their rampage. The next issue gives a look into the backstory of this version of Bruce, and his first days of being Batman. I do actually like how they show him sort of testing out different tactics to scare criminals, as he used to the whole thing, and how early on he tried implementing fangs and claws into the design, though it didn't really have the effect he intended. Even Bruce realises this isn't quite working, and burns his whole costume before eventually finding something better and getting the hang of the whole thing. It's cool to see a bit more of his relationship with Thomas as well, and how he sort of inspired Bruce. I also really like the scene on the rooftop where he's watching all the corrupt guys and sort of declares war on them until he says he'll come for them. It kind of reminds me of Year One a bit in that scene where he appears to the Commissioner and all the others at the dinner. Batman goes to the meeting point with Black Mask, who seems very stuck that he got him to accept the deal, only for Batman to reveal he used it for his bat signal and pretty much uses this whole thing to show he's not going to let him tear the city apart and proclaims he doesn't need any fancy equipment to be Batman. And it's a really great scene where he once again tears through all of them. Even that guy who got his handicap that he hated returns, only to get his ass kicked once again and gets impaled with the spikes on Batman's back. Black Mask sees he's losing and orders his men to fire his own people, showing it once again just how much of a psycho this Surgeon is, as he doesn't even care about his own guys. I'm glad they show Batman actually show concern for their deaths, as despite how brutal this Surgeon is, he still values all life, and I'm glad they didn't alter that too much, as his philosophy is arguably the most important part of Batman, so I'm glad they didn't change that just to be different. Black Mask proceeds to break Batman's arm and set him on fire, but not before telling him how meaningless his crusade is. This is probably the most humiliating moment for him so far in his career, as Black Mask proceeds to make the citizens go nuts and start killing people for money with just one speech, without even really needing to lift a finger, cementing just how intimidating this version is. Anyways, Bruce heads to Wayland's apartment to get patched up and confesses that he's Batman, as Black Mask starts handing out guns to the people and gives people the mask so they can identify the targets. It's nice to see Oswald get involved a little bit more in the action, as he flies Bruce over to Sionis' boat, though he's pretty pissed that he's Batman. Anyways, Batman hops out and beats all the thugs up, and we get probably the funniest panel in the series in this moment as well. Whilst all of this is going on, Alfred's arguing with his daughter, Julia, over leaving Gotham, and we can also see Alfred's a bit conflicted, and not only losing his daughter's trust, but also outright abandoning Bruce and pretty much leaving him to die. Black Mask tries to attack Batman and gets absolutely destroyed as Batman slams a damn bowling ball into his face. Black Mask tries to slit his throat and talks about how much he enjoys killing, only to get his eyes gouged out when Batman cuts right through the mask, giving a very satisfying defeat to the character. Really such that no-kill role though, but I guess he's technically still alive, but damn. I do hope we see Black Mask again some point because I did like this iteration. I mean, I'm sure we will, since I believe he managed to slip away, but I mean, he was never arrested, so I guess he will return at some point. Anyways, Batman destroys the server room just in time to shut down the whole network and save Martha and Jim. It was nice seeing them stick together, and through their perspectives we got to see the city at its lowest point, of how the people turned on each other and were willing to kill anyone, and Martha even straight up punches one of them when they take off the masks. I also love seeing Alfred return, and this marks the point where we really see the trust and respect grow between them, as he saves Batman and patches him up, and tells him he's sticking around. Overall, I thought the Party Animals arc was very good, and did a great job introducing us to this new version of the character in his world. This new version of Batman felt very unique, and I loved how they explained more about him through Alfred's point of view, as he learned more about him at the same time Alfred did. And instead of just being a loner in his early years like other renditions, this version of Batman actually relied more on his allies, that being his friends in Crime Alley, and they did a good job making them likeable, especially Edward and Wayland, and how they aided Bruce. Even keeping Martha alive allowed us to see a more human side of Bruce and his relationship with her, so he wasn't completely closed off, though when shit went down, he wasn't afraid to rip those guys apart. I also just really like how this Batman operates, where he's willing to take such extreme actions like burning down his own hideouts to send a message when the Party Animals found it to instill fear in them, and how crafty he was, like when he made the salt water and the hydrochloric acid back in the aquarium and unleashed it on the group of Party Animals. They really made him a force to be reckoned with, even more so than usual. Like I said before, even Black Mask was a good villain, and his more twisted version really reflected well against this version of the Gotham. He was actually quite charismatic when he manipulated Bullock and the city of Gotham into tearing itself apart, and was even willing to get his own hands dirty when he straight up tried to personally kill Batman at the end of the arc. Alfred also made for a good secondary character, and I kind of love how he reacts to all this crazy shit the same way the audience does, and even though he's different, I think this new version has an interesting dynamic with Batman, as they don't really know each other yet, and they're kind of at each other's throats for a bit. At the end of this arc, we're also introduced to Absolute Joker. Well, we actually saw a panel of him at the end of issue 1, but I wanted to wait until now to talk about him. I love how they made this version of Joker essentially be like a more evil and twisted version of mainline Bruce Wayne, for he has all the wealth and resources and comes across as being a regular billionaire, but secretly having a very dark alter ego. I thought the new issue, that being issue 15, did a good job of showing us more of this version, and I love how they kept parts of his backstory vague, with even Alfred admitting all his ramblings are really just his interpretation, sort of alluding to Joker's multiple origins, and how he doesn't know if Jack Grimm is really just one person or not, who somehow managed to prolong his life. We could even see how maniacal he is, where he hunts people on his islands that he owns. For example, he trapped Alfred's old partner on an island, left him there for years, and then eventually returned to hunt him down and kill him. This is also where his true form is revealed. It looks like a far creepier version of the Titan Joker from Arkham Asylum. I know a lot of people talk about how menacing this design is and how he's essentially Pennywise in this universe, but I'm actually more interested in the other side of him. And I think that the idea of making Joker represent, I guess, chaotic order to Batman's chaotic good in this timeline was a great idea. As we see, it's Batman who's pulling out the more bombastic stunts, like burning millions to make a bat signal, or lighting a building on fire to show his symbol. There are only really a few criticisms. Like I mentioned earlier, this Batman doesn't really feel like middle class despite being marketed as that, and he has a lot of similar gadgets to the mainline version, and I do wish we got to see a bit more of Harvey and Oz, especially the former, as he really didn't do much at all. Also, I do think the whole fight at the end may be resolved a bit too quickly, as all Batman had to do was blow up the server room and solve the issue completely. But overall, this was still a good arc and served as a solid introduction to the series. There's a short arc afterwards that focuses a little bit on Mr. Freeze, and we get more information about Arkham. Mr. Freeze looks like fucking Slenderman in this universe. In this universe, he's actually the son of Norman and Victor, and keeps his victims encased in ice, and he's basically being driven mad after being encased in ice his whole childhood. I know some people weren't fans of this, and some missed a more sympathetic Mr. Freeze, but I'm glad it was something different, and it kind of dodges the whole issue regarding why Bruce doesn't just help Victor cure Nora. It was also a very haunting moment when he's basically made all his victims zombies and set them after Batman. Even Batman had to basically retreat, showing just how powerful these new versions of the Rogues Gallery are compared to Bruce, who despite being built like a truck, is still just a regular human when compared to these guys. The second arc is the one that really ramps up the intensity of the story, and is the one everyone talks about, and that's of course the Abomination arc featuring Bane. This arc is really good, and is really absolute Batman's first real test. I mean, most versions of Batman don't encounter Bane until way later on in their career, but there's literally only the third major villain he's up against, and it's the strongest one. I mean, Batman's first interaction with him in Arkham is one of the best moments in the entire story thus far. Alfred's internal monologue about how impossible Batman's fight really is, paralleled with the introduction of Bane, is already very well done, but then Bane just absolutely destroys him. The biggest problem with a lot of Bane adaptations is that sometimes they have a habit of making him a dumb brute with no intelligence whatsoever, but this version more than lives up to the hype. He really dismantles Batman under a minute, and their skill level is not even in the same ballpark. Bane even sort of mocks him by sort of edging him on each time he breaks one of his bones. The big surprise when Batman says he's nothing without the venom, only for Bane to reveal he wasn't even used it, but when he does use it, he transforms into a little hulking monster and easily lifts him up using only one hand. It's a great introduction to this version of the character, as he didn't even break a set taking Batman down. The next issue gets very dark for Bruce, as he's locked up in Arkham over the course of several months and tortured and experimented on, as this issue recounts his numerous escape attempts, and we see Bruce's spirit weaken as the issue progresses. I will say I do love how this issue just shows how adaptable Bruce is, and despite taking away all his gadgets, he's still able to improvise and use literally everything at his disposal to get out. He takes out his own teeth to use for combat, he uses his feeding tube to access his stomach, acid, and mouth guy's face. This is what makes Batman stand out, as even though he has no powers, his creativity and willingness to push himself well past his physical and mental limits is what makes him what he is, and this issue is a great example of that. I mean, man, he was able to make a mini explosion by pissing on his guano. That's some badass shit right there. Despite all his efforts, however, they're all in vain, and this issue does a great job of showing how hopeless this struggle is, as he's sent down endless hallways through Arkham that never seem to end with no gadgets or even his suit. Arkham is basically just a torture chamber in this, where people are turned into monsters. I just love how atmospheric it is, where everywhere Bruce turns, he's presented with characters like Clayface and Ivy, who are a lot more screwed up in this universe, and this issue really leans into the body horror element. Despite all this, the biggest monster Bruce faces is Bane, and they do such a great job of showing that despite him being in the cage of a bunch of horror movie monsters, Bane is easily the most threatening out of them all, as he constantly thwarts Bruce's escape attempts and keeps trying to push him to keep going despite constantly beating the shit out of him. My favourite moment in this issue comes towards the end, when Bruce is almost ready to give up until they test him one final time by showing him that batsuit, and he just stares at it for a moment before once again getting back in the fight. That one panel just says so much, and it's great to see him back in action as Bane hasn't broken him yet. Of course, things go wrong again when Bane turns up, but this time he makes the mistake of accidentally breaking one of the cages, letting Wayland, who's no Killer Croc, out of his cell, who just knocks him through a wall with his tail. And yes, the image of Batman riding Killer Croc was metal as fuck, and they make their escape. The next issue covers Bane's backstory in Santa Prisca, and I do love the mini-story we get about his father and how it parallels to Bruce's relationship with his own father. Alfred explains the tale of how Bane's father led a war to obtain Santa Prisca's freedom, but they were all captured and tossed into Peña Dura, where we see just how terrible Bane's early life was, how the cells were flooded, how they were forced to eat rats to survive, and how he had to defend his father from fellow inmates. Eventually they escape, however, after setting a plan in motion, but here we once again see Joker, who again looks very similar to the Earth Prime version of Bruce Wayne. He whispers something to Bane before leaving, and despite what little we see of him, I much prefer seeing this more manipulative side than the Eldritch abomination he turns into, as I think that's where the strength of the Joker truly lies, and the mystique is amplified further, so you don't even hear what he whispered to Bane that twisted his mind so much. It's actually pretty tragic to see Bane kill his father, but despite only being there for like half an issue, we really got to see the struggle he went through in only these couple of panels, and how much he genuinely cared for his son as he hugged him when he thought they were finally free. Bane chose to tarnish his father's legacy by serving Joker, in contrast to Bruce, who honoured his father by becoming Batman. We further see just how depraved Bane became, as we see what he's done to help Joker, killing the likes of diplomats and journalists secretly and assassinating people, and how he allowed the Venom to consume him. The rest of the issue is pretty much Alfred's imagination, as he has a vision of what Bane will do to Batman. And even though I'm not the biggest fan of this type of thing, where they show us something interesting only to reveal it's just a dream/vision, it still provides very haunting imagery, as Batman once again gets completely obliterated and gets his head bashed in and his arms cut off. I think what makes Bane even more disturbing is that back home he actually does have a regular family, and even occasionally visits his father's grave, showing that he may actually have regrets, even though the island is now prospering. However, it makes his actions even more horrific, as he acts like a normal person when he gets home, despite how much horror he inflicts on others. I'm glad they do add a bit of depth here though, however, as he does want to retire and wants Batman to take his place, which is why he's so persistent in hunting him down. After all this, Bane visits Oz, Harvey and Edward and tortures them to punish Bruce for escaping. It's very screwed up as he burns half of Harvey's face, crushes Ed's skull, and perhaps worst of all, literally breaks every bone in Oz's body, leaving him incapable of even moving or really doing anything. Admittedly, I would have liked this to happen a little bit later on, so you could have seen a bit more of Bruce's friendship with these characters instead of all these transformations happening at the same time. But hopefully they won't all go immediately evil after this. I mean, Edward still seems to be helping Bruce out, so there's something at least, and I hope the other two don't quickly become villains as well, and get a little bit more screen time with them still on Bruce's side. Bruce is clearly heartbroken when he sees all this occur and tries to call off the Red Hood gang, and he even tells Alfred that maybe he should have considered taking Sionis' deal, showing just how draining this experience has been for him. They're interrupted, however, when Catwoman makes her first appearance in the story that isn't through a flashback. We get to see a bit more of how close they are next issue, and they go and visit the Red Hood gang, and we learn Batman knows some Venom still in his system from the experiments, and really brings down a Ferris wheel. Before they can continue to attack, Bruce tells them about how he still plans to take on Bane and bring down Arkham, and we're introduced to this new version of Harley Quinn, who's actually against Joker in the Absolute Universe, and is actually working with Batman. We haven't actually seen a lot of this version of the character yet, but it's definitely an interesting take, and it's cool to see her acting independently and leading her own crew. I do like seeing Wayland also berate Bruce in the flashback about following Falcone's order and even fired him for telling him to drop out in the 7th round. It shows this Bruce still has a lot to learn due to the fact he even considered the deal, and we get to see how much Wayland inspired Bruce, and I feel like he remembered this conversation when he burned the money Sionis offered him. I also like Bruce's speech at the end and how he challenges Bane. It seems some people call parts of the speech too edgy, but let's be real, Bane ruined his and his friends' lives, so I think it works fine with how pissed off Bruce is. Selena also tells Bruce not to use the Venom and do what Bane did, though Bruce is apprehensive, and it's pretty understandable with how much of a threat Bane is, because the last time they fought, Batman didn't manage to hurt him at all, so he thinks the Venom is his only chance. And I like how rash Bruce is here, as you have to remember he did see all his friends get tortured, so I get why he's a bit more shut off than usual, especially to Selena. Even Alfred recommends him to use the Venom, and we also see Wayland watching from afar at the end. Now, issue 14 is amazing, and it's definitely my favourite issue of the series so far. I was a little worried it wouldn't live up to the hype once I saw the big confrontation was only one issue, and I feel like Bruce wouldn't get his proper payback on Bane, but I had nothing to worry about as this issue more than lived up to the hype. We see everyone prepare for the fight against Bane, and Bane ignores the Doctor's orders and marches to the stadium for his fight with Batman. And I really like how this issue parallels Wayland's fight in the past as well, and how both fights phonetically tied together at the end, as you now see Batman in Wayland's position, fighting what seems like an impossible fight. We also do see as well just how far Joker's influence runs, that even Hill seems to be under some, for he tries to shut down all broadcasts of the fight, only for the Red Hood gang to record it for the city anyways. The fight already starts off good, and we so prepared Bruce is, for he drops a damn building on top of Bane, and Alfred drives the Batmobile into Bane right afterwards, but despite all of it, Bane still seems fine. Batman really puts everything into this, and even manages to rip out Bane's eyeball, but Bane just tanks all of it, and tosses him around like a rag doll. Just when it looks like it's over though, Killer Croc pops out of nowhere and tears into Bane, and Batman chops Bane's leg with an axe. I also find it funny how even Bane loses his composure and stops with the philosophical bullshit and just starts throwing out insults, which even Batman picks up on. It's really the first time we see Bane caught off guard, and it's great to see even Wayland get some revenge, as he was treated even worse by Arkham with what they turned him into. I also like was Bane finally manages to regain his footing and beat Croc. We get a cool contrast in the flashback, with Wayland struggling in his fight against the boxer, and in both versions, Bruce comes to his aid, making up for letting Wayland down earlier when he urged him to drop out. And in the present day, we get one of the best panels in the comic, with Batman slicing Bane's back open and saving Wayland. It's so satisfying to see Batman say the same lines Bane said to him when he beat the shit out of him a couple of issues prior. And I do like how when Bruce brings up Bane's father, that's what causes Bane to get back on his feet and shows that deep down he does hate what he did and truly didn't want to become Joker's lapdog. Bane becomes more enraged, however, and grows even more massive, but here we see Catwoman return and Jack Bane with even more venom, causing his system to overload and he really just explodes. And we also see Wayland turn the fight around in the flashback as well. We get a flashback showing that Bruce had Edward remove the venom from his system, showing that he didn't need it at all. I've seen some people suggesting he still had a bit of it in him, of how he was tanking Bane's hits. That would just ruin the point of the issue in my opinion, and also he's able to tank it because he's Batman, I mean come on. I will say it's nice to see Harvey cheer Bruce on from watching the TV, as Batman dumps what's left of Bane into the ocean, and hopeful that they may stay good for at least a bit longer, and we also see that Catwoman snuck away with some of the venom. The issue ends with us seeing what little of Bane is left inside a tube, and we see Joker address him through a video call, where he reveals he's nuked Sancta Prisca, and says that Bane will still work for him. It's very dark, and actually made me feel a little bit bad for Bane despite everything he did, as his wife and son were also killed, and show just how much worse Joker is, how calmly he delivers this information to him. Also makes me wonder if maybe Bane will turn on Joker at some point in the future for revenge, which would be cool to see. So that just about covers everything in the story so far, and as you can tell, I love this whole arc, and it's definitely one of my favourite versions of Bane, right up there alongside Arkham Origins. This series has done a great job of reinventing the mythos, and if you're a fan of Batman, I highly recommend this series. Even if you aren't a fan, I'd still check it out, as it's a great jumping on point for people interested in starting to read comics, and offers a very good interpretations of these characters that are unique, and I'm very interested in seeing where the story goes from here. Especially since Scott Snyder has teased Absolute Scarecrow, and he's one of my favourite Batman villains, so I'm definitely excited for what's to come. Anyways, I'll see you all later.